Hi everybody, this video will describe how to create a first person and third person camera switch so we can change between first person point of view and third person point of view. The previous two videos have created individual first person and third person character movement. So here is the first person character movement. Move around, I can move my mouse around, spacebar to jump, and I'm looking through the character from a first person point of view. And if I turn that off and turn my third person node back on. Okay, now I'm looking from it from a third person point of view. So it's a free look camera. I can move around with WASD and spacebar to jump. So that's the previous two videos. You can look at the previous videos for more information on those individual setups. We're going to branch off of that and add the first person setup as a switch to the third person character setup. So first off, I'm going to make sure that I turn off the set active from a first person character. If you were setting up a switch in your game, then you just delete this whole first person character, and we're going to recreate that in the third person character. I am going to keep and use that camera look script from the first person standpoint, but I am going to turn off the set active for first person character. If I look at my game mode, you can see it's going to default back to my third person camera. So make sure my third person camera set active is turned on and my third person character object set active is turned on. So that's going to default back to looking for the free look cinema camera and third person point of view. I'm using Cinemachine cameras here, so you can download the Cinemachine plugin, and the main camera is looking for the only camera that's active now, which is my third person point of view camera. We're going to come back and we're going to add a second camera here. So we're going to take what we have created for the first person point of view with the script and the movement script and the camera script, and we're going to add that to our third person character movement script so we can do the switch on the third person point of view. So the first thing we're going to create is a new Cinemachine camera, and we're going to create a virtual camera this time. So Cinemachine, create virtual camera. And the other camera, I called it first person camera. I'm just going to say sub right there. Sub, because I want to just use my third person character, and I'm going to rename this new virtual camera first person camera. Okay. So this is actually going to be our first person camera that's going to get paired underneath our third person character. I'm going to reset my transforms, puts it back to the center, and I'm going to move it up. I'll zoom in. I'm going to put it above the character's head, somewhat like that. I don't want to see the eyes, but we'll turn off the visibility of the geometry when we're in first person point of view as well. Alright, so then I'm going to take this first person camera, virtual camera, and drag that underneath the third person camera, similar to how I did the first person camera from the previous video. So my third person camera is still separate, but my third person character has the first person camera parented underneath. So basically, all the same motion is still going to be on my third person character controller and the script, but my first person camera is going to follow along with it. One thing to note about virtual cameras and Cinemachine cameras is that we have a priority, and this is what I'm going to use to switch between which camera the main camera is looking through. So if I select the main camera, because I created a secondary camera, it's actually looking through that first person camera. And if I go select that first person camera, it defaults the priority to 10. So I'm going to be changing that priority. The higher the number, the main camera will look through the highest priority number. So first person camera has a priority of 10, third person camera has a priority of 1. If I change the first person camera, you can see here the game mode is looking through the first person camera. If I change that priority to 0, it's going to default back to the third person camera because the third person camera's priority is set to 1. So right now, let's just change this to 2 for the first person camera. I want to start in first person mode and then toggle back and forth in and out of third person back to first person. So I want to make sure I'm looking through my first person camera. Priority is going to be higher than my third person camera priority. Alright, so the other thing I want to change is on the main camera is how I'm blending between the two camera cuts. If you want a smooth blend, then we can change that to underneath default blend. Oops. If I hold down here, there's a custom, ease in, ease out, hard in, linear. Those are blending between these different camera cuts, different cameras. But I just want to have a cut. I just want to quickly cut between first person and third person. So underneath the main camera, Cinemachine Brain, there is a default blend, and I'm going to change that to cut there. So that way it's a quick cut between the two different cameras. It's not going to smooth blend. But you can change that however you might want to. You can add a custom curve to that as well. Alright, the next thing I need to do is set up an input so that when I press a button, let's say the T key, it will toggle between the third person and first person camera and third person and first person character movement. So if I go to Edit Project Settings, as default this is probably going to say size of 18. So if I put that back to 18, that's what's default. If I do change that to one more size of 19, that adds another one that just defaults to the name cancel. So these are pre-set up inputs: mouse X, jump, move horizontal and vertical. But what I want to do is go down to the last one, which is number 19, and the duplicate copy of cancel. And we're just going to title this one, let's see, cam toggle. And I do need to make sure I know exactly how that's spelled. So camera toggle, and then the positive button is the button I need to press. So when I press the T key, so let's just do T underscore or lowercase t. When the T key is pressed, it's going to perform my camera toggle. Now this is just the name of that event that I am calling the T press event. So whenever I call that cam toggle input, it's going to say when the T key is pressed, do something. So you can add 20, 21 more inputs, but cam toggles we're going to call this, and the positive button's T. We're going to close it out. So then now in our script we can refine our character movement script so that we're adding the first person character movement to that. Alright, so one other thing we need to do is we have a first person camera. We want to be able to rotate this camera when the mouse moves. So we have a previous script that we have for that, and that's the camera look script that looks like this right here. So we have player reference, mouse sensitivity, and the X rotation, and that funnels into the mouse X and Y movement that then allows us to rotate the camera when the mouse is moving left or right or up and down. So previous video introduced that. I want to add that camera look script to my first person camera that is parented underneath my third person character. So let's drag that in. Here we go. We need a player reference, which is going to be our third person character node. So we're going to drag that in. And then let's just decrease our mouse sensitivity again to 2. Let's do 3 actually. So we'll do 3 there. 3. Here we go. Alright, so now we're ready to go into our character movement script and make our adjustments and additions to when I press the T key to do something, and that is going to switch between the different cameras, and also to change between third person character movement and first person character movement. So we're going to add our first person stuff and our toggle T key switch to the third person character. So this is going to be in our third person script. So I titled my player movement third person start, and then I also have the player movement first person. So if I open these up, I'm going to need both of them because I'm going to be copying some of the areas of my first person script over into my third person script. I'm going to leave the rest as is, and we're going to make some adjustments to the movement, create custom functions with them to make it easier to recall. So we're going to need a couple of things here. We're going to need references, a couple of new variables. We're going to need references to our cameras. So these are Cinemachine cameras. So the first thing we need to add actually is up at the top, using Cinemachine. So that way it references the Cinemachine plugin. And then underneath our publics that we've already created, let's add another public, and we're going to call the first one Cinemachine Free Look. And we're just going to simply call this one Cam1 and semicolon. And I'm going to add a comment to the end of that. Just to remind myself, this is going to be third person cam. Okay. So this is a reference to a Cinemachine Free Look camera, which is our third person camera. It's the type of camera that is. And then the next line down, we're going to need another public, and then this is a Cinemachine, and this one's going to be called a virtual camera, Cinemachine virtual camera, and we're going to locally call that cam2, and we'll add a comment and say first person cam, so we know that's the first person cam. So the virtual camera is typed out Cinemachine virtual camera. The free look camera is just Cinemachine free look. Okay, and we have to have the using Cinemachine up at the top in order to reference Cinemachine cameras. All right, we need another private variable. So underneath my private variables I already have, I'm going to add another one, and this is going to be a Boolean, and this is going to be a toggle. So we're just going to call it a toggle. So basically, it's going to be a switch to go left or right, or A or B. The first time the T key is pressed, it'll do one action. The second time the T key is pressed, it'll do a different action. The third time that T key is pressed, it'll go back to the first action. So A, B switch there. Okay, so we're going to approach this in chunks. The first thing we are going to add underneath void update is the toggle function. Okay, so we want to put this underneath this top main section that deals with gravity and jumping, and then this next section underneath that is the third person movement section. So we want to put it above third person movement. So we're going to return down underneath this controller.move, which is the last line of the add in velocity with gravity. And we're going to add an if statement that determines if the T key is pressed. So if open parentheses input.get button down, and open parentheses open quotations, and we need to reference our input, which was cam toggle. Okay, so we need to make sure that is the same as what we set up in Unity. Go back into edit project settings. What do we call this? We call this one cam toggle, capital C, capital T. We don't need a semicolon at the end there. So if the cam toggle button is down, which is the T key, then do something. So let's open up and close curly brackets. The first thing we want to do is to be able to toggle this on and off. So we created a Boolean variable called toggle, and a switch works as simple as going this method. So we go toggle equals not toggle and semicolon. So that'll basically mean the first time this is pressed, do one thing. The second time it's pressed, do something else. So that's a good, easy way to do a switch. Now we're then going to tell it what to do if toggle is pressed the first time or if it's pressed the second time. So we're going to return down underneath the toggle equals not toggle, and the not command is an exclamation mark. So that means toggle, not toggle. And it just swaps back and forth every time the button's pressed. So underneath that, we're going to add an if statement, say if toggle is true. We are starting off in first person point of view. So we're going to return down and do curly brackets. And then what this section is going to do is switch to third person. Okay. So this is really just going to be switched to third person cam, is what this is going to be. So comment that out. If toggle is true the first time it's pressed, then we're going to switch to third person. To do that, we're going to use that priority. So we're going to change that priority from our two cams. So we reference our third person cam as cam1. So we're going to do cam1.priority equals 1. Okay, we want to make that number for the priority higher than the other one. And then underneath that, we're going to do cam2.priority equals 0. So that will mean we're going to switch from looking from the first person camera, which is our cam2, to now looking through the third person camera, which is cam1. So if toggle is pressed the first time, move into third person camera, which is cam1.priority as a higher value than cam2.priority. Underneath that, we're going to do, that's our if toggle is pressed the first time. If toggle is pressed the second time, then we're going to do else. And this one's going to be switch to first person cam. And we're going to flip flop. We're going to say cam1.priority equals 0. Cam2.priority equals 1. So in this method, Cam 2, which is our first-person camera, will become visible, or we're going to take control of that first-person camera and not the third-person camera. Alright, so that's our toggle buttons. That's our switch to go back and forth between looking between one camera and the next camera. So we're going to start off by looking from first-person camera, and then first time toggle key is pressed, we move to third person. Then the second time, then we move to first person, then we move back to third, then we move back to first. So it's going to be a switch back and forth. Alright, so we have our references. We can go save, Control S to save. And we're going to go back into Unity. We'll check for errors. Looks like I'm spelling something improperly here. Alright, so let's go look. There's an R and not an R in virtual, so let's remove that out. Virtual. V-I-R-T-U-A-L. There you go. Control S to save. Go back in Unity. Alright, there we go. Alright, so in our third-person character, we need references to our two cameras. So we have a third-person camera, and that's our free look camera, so that's going to go into cam 1. And our first-person camera is our virtual camera, so that's going to go into cam 2. Alright, so if I hit play, I can move around. I'm looking through first-person point of view. I'm clipping through the geometry right now, that's okay. But if I hit T for toggle, I can go to my third-person camera. If I hit T for toggle again, and go back to first-person. So that's a good, easy switch between two different cameras. And these are virtual cameras. But I'm still controlling it from first-person point of view. So what I do need to now adjust is adjust for the motion and the movement of the character depending on if I'm in first-person or third-person. Alright, so underneath our toggle, we are going to now add another if statement that switches between third person and first person movement. So we're going to create custom functions here in a minute, but let's go ahead and create our if statement and then we'll create our functions after that. So underneath our cam toggle button is pressed, the T key. Underneath that if statement, we're going to add another if statement, and this is going to reference, so if cam1.priority equals 1. Which, if you remember, that means switch to third person. So if we are in third person point of view camera, then we want to run our third person character movement. So if cam1.priority is equals to 1, open and close our curly brackets, then we're going to call a custom function that we're going to create in a minute, and we'll just call this one third person movement. And then do open and close parentheses and semicolon. So we haven't actually created that function yet, but we're going to create that here in a second. So if we're looking through third-person camera, then run third-person character movement. Underneath that, else if cam2.priority equals 1, then we're going to run a first-person movement function. So we're going to do first-person movement, open and close parentheses, and semicolon. Okay. So the first toggle switches us between cam 1 and cam 2. First person to begin with, and then I click toggle the first time, switch to third person, or the second time it's going to switch back to first person. And then our second if statement, if the cam 1 priority for looking through third person, then run third person movement script or function. If I'm looking through first person character, then run first person movement function. Alright, so now all we need to do is move our movement code or sections into a new void function called third person movement. So underneath our if statements we just created, we're going to come in here and create that third person movement function and first person movement function. So let's start with third person, since the third person movement actions are already in this script. So we're going to say void third person movement, open and close our parentheses, and then we're going to define what happens when this function is created. So we're going to open our curly bracket, and then underneath everything I'm going to add another curly bracket, and then all of my lines of code for my third person movement I'm just going to indent one. So I'm going to hit tab. Okay, so all of this function is going to be determining third person movement. So if you want to review kind of what we've done here, you can go back to previous videos on how I set up the third person character movement. All I did was just take all of that motion and all the interactions we've done with the inputs for the third person character movement and put that in a new custom function called third person movement. And then in our if statement above that, that's when we call that third person function to determine to move into third person mode. All right, so that's set up, and then the next thing we need to do is come down underneath that void function and add a void first person movement function. And we'll open and close our curly brackets. And here's where we're going to go into our first person character script and copy over the lines of code that allow us to move in a first person standpoint. So let's go player movement first person. Go down to the void. Here's our movement section. I commented out with movement. So I just need these 4 lines of code to get the character to move in a first person standpoint. The rest of it is kind of copied over from gravity and jumping. So let's copy that from our first person script. And then in our third person script, we're going to come into our first person movement function and back up here, paste that in, and then drag select everything and tab over. So now we have a third person movement function and a first person movement function. Then we're calling that when we are in third person camera or first person camera. All right, so let's save and let's go back into Unity. Let's make sure we don't have any errors. Yep, we're good. Okay, we don't need any other references. We do want to make sure we have all of our references that we need there. And let's go play test. Let's go see. So it's going to start from first person point of view mode. So I can move around. We'll take care of the character clipping in a minute. But I can move around. My mouse sensitivity and motion's a little off. So let's see if we can go correct that. But let's go correct that first here. All right, I've dug a little bit. It actually is working properly. Let me show again. But one other thing I did want to mention as far as refining the code a little bit is, this is not too big of a deal because it's 2 different functions, but we are looking for move LR in 2 different areas as far as a local variable. So we can always just go through and change our first person input local variables to move LR1, move FB1, and then replace it down here in our 2 spots of move LR1, move FB1, and that'll just make sure that it's not looking for the same variable elsewhere, but it shouldn't have any problem. But the rest should work, so we can save that, go back into Unity, and we can hit play. So first person setup, if we hit T for toggle, we go into third person mode. We move around, we can jump, we can move the camera around. If we hit T again, we're going back into first person mode, and we can move around from first person point of view. The other thing we got to correct is the ability to be able to see through the geometry. So when in first person mode, we're just going to toggle or turn off the set active option for our player geometry. So basically we're going to reference this player geometry object and checkbox on and off, which is the set active command. So what we're going to do first is actually turn off the player geometry. So in first person mode to begin with, we're not going to see the player geometry, and then we're going to get a reference of that. So let's just close all this other stuff out. There you go. In our player movement script, we're going to add one more public variable, and that's going to be a game object, and we're going to call this one player geo ref, maybe player geo reference for player geometry reference. And then in our toggle, the same area we changed the camera priority, we're going to switch back and forth. So in third person point of view, we want to do player geo ref dot game object dot set active. and we're going to set that to true when we're in third person point of view. And let's just copy that line of code, and I'm going to paste that underneath the else, which is our first person camera. So player georef.gameObject.setActive, set active, and then this is going to be set to false. So in a first person point of view, we want to turn off the visibility of the player geometry, but in third person point of view, we want it to be visible. So let's save, and let's go back into Unity. So the player geometry is set active as off as default because it's in first person point of view. So we can move around, that works. If as far as the character is not there, if we hit T to go into character mode, it did not turn on. Oh, we don't have our reference, right? Okay, so let's go back to our character, and on the script we need that player geometry reference. So let's take our player geometry object and drag that into our player geometry reference, and let's save Unity and hit play. So in first person mode, the geometry is not visible. If we hit T for toggle, the character is visible in third person mode. If I hit T to go back into first person mode, the character geometry is not visible again, and everything should work how we want to. So that's a simple way to set up a quick toggle switch between third person and first person in Unity. That'll wrap up this video.